Yes, and it's recording now. There we go. Everyone is here. Okay, let's start then.
Okay, so
Muy,
I'll share my. Oh, okay, sorry.
ya. Muy buenas tardes, siendo las 19 horas del día de hoy, jueves 9 de junio del 2022. Damos inicio a la disertación de la tesina que según resolución 597 barra 2002, 2022, perdón, tiene lugar la defensa de esta tesina que tiene por nombre Words Considered Offensive or Discriminatory for Young Paraguayan Men and Women. Y esta tesina pertenece a la universitaria María Fernanda Barrios Pereira. Tenemos nuestro comité evaluador, cuya presidente es del tribunal, es la profesora Romina Bento. Muy buenas tardes, profesora.
Buenas noches, profesor Cristóful. Buenas noches, Fer.
Y también los miembros del tribunal, las profesoras Sharon Weaver y María Belén Migliorisi. Muy buenas tardes. Noche ya, ya estamos en noche,
Buenas
¿no?
noches, buenas noches.
Bueno, las 7 de la noche. Entonces, le pasamos el micrófono a la profesora Romina Bento. Ella va a liderar o llevar a cabo el evento en idioma inglés.
Le pedimos a todos los presentes que por favor muteen sus micrófonos para que la persona que está hablando no tenga eco. And Fer, we're all ready for you when you want to start presenting.
Okay. Let me know when you can see the screen.
All's good, Fer.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, professors, and good evening to all of you who managed to join this online presentation. I'm Fernanda Barrios, and first of all, I would like to thank the members of the evaluation committee for being here today to value this research study. And I would also like to thank my tutor, Dr. Valentina Canese, and of course, my family and friends for their constant support during this process. This thesis is titled Words Considered Offensive and Discriminatory for Young Paraguayan Men and Women. And it is mainly about people's perception and recognition of offensive language. Before starting, I would like to say that the following presentation contains sensitive content and strong language, which might be offensive for the audience. So this presentation will be organized in 5 different parts. First, I'll start with a brief introduction regarding the context, the purpose of the study, the research problem, and also the questions posted for the thesis. Following this, I'll be talking about the literature review so we can understand a bit more the information we already have in this line of research. Then I'll be talking about the methodology used and the results obtained from the research. And finally, we will end with the conclusions. So a little bit of context first, and this research study originated from the thought that people don't always perceive language the same way, especially when it comes to words that may offend others. And as we know, the world is changing very fast in the attempt of making language more inclusive and also avoid the use of words that might be hurting others. And that is why my research is especially focused on the recognition of those words, but specifically through young people because it is an age range that I am more familiar with, and I can say I have more context than, for example, adult language. So we can now proceed with the research problem and the purpose of the study. And essentially, the problem is based on the words, which at first may not have derogatory connotations, but when they are used in certain contexts or when they are said to certain people, those meanings can change. and that can result in either voluntarily or involuntarily offending others. And as for the purpose of the study, it is mainly about recognizing which words are considered offensive by young people in Paraguay. And by identifying those words, we can have a clear notion of maybe how to start diminishing their use and also create more consciousness, especially in the matter of verbal discrimination. Now, for the questions, we have the main research question, which is: do 20 to 25-year-old Paraguayan men and women perceive the same words as offensive? And for sub questions, we have: which are considered offensive words for women, which are considered offensive words for men, and if there is a significant difference among them. And finally, also what factors that this depend on, and if it changes according to the intention. Now, to delimit this study, I focus only on participants from two regions of Paraguay, Asunción and Gran Asunción, and only participants between the ages of 20 and 25 years old. And these aspects actually leads us to limitations because since it is only focused on two regions, as I said, Asunción and Gran Asunción, the required number for the sample to be representative might not reach the amount for it to be a representative sample. And that also happens with the age because it significantly reduces the amount. Now, considering ethical issues, we can say that the data collection method is completely anonymous and confidential because participants don't know each other and they don't know how other people respond to the survey, and that actually allows them to provide answers that can be more open and more honest because they have complete privacy. We can now move on to talk about the literature behind this research study. And to do that, we will focus on three major parts: youth language, insults, and genders. Now, first, for youth language, according to Klaus Zimmermann, who is a German linguist and Hispanist, he says that youth language is characterized by social variation, and there are different varieties that actually correlates with different social factors, like, for example, sex, ethnic groups, and race. He also says that there are two bases of language: one that is educated and one that is vulgar or popular. He says that people who have a vulgar speech as a base language are more inclined to use offensive words. And also, in Cimarron words, young people consider their language and communication style to be more direct and sincere than of adults, for example. And there are also other two authors that says this some similar thing to this. And Gemma Herrero and María José Caja are those authors. They say that people young people are more free when it comes to speaking with others, and that they aren't afraid of expressing themselves. So that is why they might be more inclined to use offensive words without even realizing. Now, for insults, we have that their nature is about using certain words with the intention to harm or offend other people. And there is a psychoanalyst called Jerome New who says that there is a more familiar meaning of insults, which refers to speech that is aimed at hurting self-esteem and that is more personal, mental, and moral. For New, insults can be unintentional, but they can also be used to humiliate and declare superiority over others. He also says that insults might be measured according to the effects they have on each person, because some may not mind about people words that are said against them, but others might be completely offended, even if the intention of the speaker was not that one. And New says that people take offense more often than it is meant to be given. Now, regarding genders, we have the work of Lozano, and he says that both genders behave differently in their interactions and in the organization of their speech, because each gender has a way of developing a subject and changing it to another, maybe interrupting others in a conversation or following the rules of courtesy. And there are also many other aspects that all have to do with communication. Lozano also mentions Lakoff in his work, and Lakoff says that women are taught to speak in a way that represses their identity, while men, on the other hand, are taught to be assertive and to use stronger and more solid expressions. And these two are actually proven by two studies, one made by Romblons and the other one made by Adelsworth in South Africa. Their findings reveal that men use more and stronger offensive expressions than women, and also that men use more swearing, which actually is for them a symbol of virility and power. But on the contrary, we have the study of the clerk, where she found out that female linguistic habits do not match commonly held perceptions. In her findings, mostly female appear to be moving towards certain freedom in terms of using impolite terms. Now, for the methodology and for the type of study, descriptive research was chosen because the objective was to identify characteristics and trends, and it is useful because not much is known yet about this topic, especially in our country. For the instrument, we have a quantitative survey because surveys are usually not expensive, especially online, and its anonymity allows participants to respond more open and more honestly, which actually that provide more valid answers. Now, I've conducted a pilot study first for the validation of the survey, which allowed me to remove some weak or irrelevant questions, oh, and also to modify others according to participants' responses. Now, the target population is young people between 20 and 25 years old, as I already mentioned. And here is also worth to point out that social class, race, sexuality, and ethnicity weren't considered, and that participants were chosen randomly. Now, since the survey was shared online, it reached a wide sample of 390 responses, which is enough to make the sample representative. Now, to collect data, the survey was provided in Spanish, and it is worth mentioning that all the words were provided in Spanish since we're in a Spanish speaker country, and then they were translated into English according to the purposes of this thesis. And so I can say that there can be some ambiguity when it comes to the results. Well, the survey provided some options from where the participants could choose. They were age, place of living, words they consider offensive, the factors to consider a word offensive, and the places where they heard it for the first time. And as I said, it was shared to young people in the areas mentioned. And as for frequency, it was sent in a weekly manner. Now, for analyzing the data, a descriptive analysis was conducted, and this one was composed of certain different steps. First was to summarize all the data from participants' responses, and then the second was to conduct a comparative analysis where I could identify relationships and differences between the responses
Hola Jorge,
in order to group them into
bien,
different categories.
decime.
And it is important to
Y
point out
las
that the only
8, ahora
analytic
mismo estoy
tool used
en
was
una
the
disertación,
Google's
en
default
una defensa de tesis.
data
A las
storage and
8,
also
Jorge.
some spreadsheets
Sí.
used to share the results.
¿Cómo?
which we will actually see
Sí,
now.
está bien. Pasado las 8 está bien.
And let's see first
Dale,
the
dale. Listo,
demography.
chao, chao.
So 390 people completed the survey, from which the majority is women, 66%, and only 33% are men. There are also four people, which is only 1%, that chose other as their gender. But I will still make small mentions regarding these group selections in order to acknowledge those four people that were open to respond to the survey this way. Okay, so from the total of participants, 51% are from Gran Asunción and 49% are from Asunción. So we can say there's almost the same quantity from both areas. And as for the age, we have that results match between two genders because 22 22-year-old women, men and women, participated the most in the survey. Now let's focus on participants' word selection. And well, most men and women consider the same word to be offensive, and that one was faggot. 75% of women and only 61% of men consider faggot as the most offensive word among all the ones listed. Now, for the people who chose other as their gender, they also agreed in most of the words, but the most selected ones were hick and crazy. Now, it is important to mention here that most men and 11% and only 6% of women didn't consider any of the words offensive. So, if we put everything together, we have a top 5 of most chosen words among the two genders. The first one is faggot, 71% of people chose it. Then we have fat, 55% of both genders chose it. Then Indian, 54%, sorry. Then we have Niga, 46%. Then we have Pur, 42%. And we also have the least selected word, which is stupid, with only 1.5%. And this word was actually added by the participants. It was not listed at first. Next, let's look at the reasons for the participants to have chosen the words they have. And we have that the most expressed reason is focused on the use that people give to words and that they are most commonly used with negative connotations. Participants that express this reason say that words alone are not offensive, but that people generally use them that way. And we actually have a testimony from one of the participants that says, if a man dresses in a certain way, using bright colors, he might be told that his clothes are gay, with the intention to insult him. The word gay is not offensive or discriminatory per se, but used in this way clearly states that the intention is to offend people who are in fact gay. And that same happens for the other words. So this testimony clearly details what the most chosen reason is about. Now, for the second most chosen reason, we have that it is about the damages that words causes to people. And participants stated that when they receive these words, they might feel offended, hurt, and that it actually affects their self-esteem and mood. Now, all the other reasons are we can see a balance between men and women selection. There's not much difference, and they are all related to either cause harm, to make people feel less value, or just maybe because they are very strong words to say, and also that they're used to discriminate. So they all have similarity. But where we can see a difference is in this reason. And although it's one of the least expressed ones, we have that 5% of men and only 1% of women um, stated that they based their reasons on personal experiences and things that they have lived in the past. They say that when they are addressed with any of the words, they feel insecure, and it actually affects their self esteem. Now we will focus on the different factors selected. And results of these questions, also as you can see in the graph, show that there's almost a balance between men who selected and women who selected. There is not much difference there. And the most selected one was this. Participants say that it does depend on who says these words to them, that it also depends on the way, the tone used, the gestures, and the context. Now, where we can see a difference is in this factor. 11% of men and only 5% of women selected this, and they said that yes, it also depends on the people who says these words to them, but especially if they are people who maybe they don't know or they are not close to them. And this implies that words might sound just too strong when people who we don't know says them to us. And as for the final results, we have the places where participants think and they have heard the words for the first time. And the most chosen place, interestingly, was the school. An almost equal number of men and women selected this location, which suggests that they are most commonly used while learning and creating social connections with other people. And where we can see a significant amount because all the others are almost the same, um, we can see it in the neighborhood. Only 8% of women selected their neighborhoods, but a number of 20% of men selected this one. And finally, an interesting point regarding this last question, sorry, has to do with the extra responses that weren't listed. And on the one hand, women, for example, chose that they have heard the words for the first time either in the street or at work. And it is interesting because both of these contexts are very different. One is more casual, and the other one is much more professional. And on the other hand, we have the extra places that men expressed. They said that they have heard either with the boys or in some bars or social events. And men actually correlate in this sense because both of these locations are more casual, let's say, in comparison with what women said. So let's see the conclusions for the final part of this presentation. And results are clear regarding our main research questions, which was about if whether 20 to 25-year-old Paraguayan men and women consider the same words as offensive. And we have that most participants, men and women, in a roughly equal number, consider the same words to be offensive or discriminatory. And as for the remaining questions, which has to do with which are the words considered offensive for women, which are the words considered offensive for men, and if there was a significant difference among them, we have that both men and women consider words such as faggot, fat, gay, Indian, nigga, poor, lazy, addict, and special person as being the most offensive ones. Now, finally, for the last question, which aim at identifying the factors behind people's selection of words, as well as if that choice may changes according to certain elements, we have that there are principal aspects to take into account, and those aspects given have to do with people's intentions, way in which words are said, tone used, the gestures, context in which these words are said, and also people's mood. And with the result of this thesis, then we have identified the most offensive words considered by young people in Paraguay, and we can have a clear notion now and create more consciousness regarding the use of these words. And the results of this study also propose some implications. According to the findings, several words have been considered offensive or discriminatory. And that actually represents a certain recognition on the power of words and the significant impact that can have on people's self-esteem and confidence. And finally, as we know, the debate about the ongoing use of these words, as offensive or not, continues to be a controversial topic, especially here in Paraguay, that we have a younger population than, for example, other countries. But still, there is a certain tendency in terms of recognizing these offensive words, as well as acknowledging people's feelings and emotions. And that actually it can create a safer and more open environment, which can be judgment and bias free. The
Saber el
recommendations
problema que
are
va a causar
mainly
eso.
related to what I already mentioned
Ok.
about considering
Ella se va a
people's
mandar a mudar
reality
a
and
trabajar
feelings
y
when
vos también
addressing
y
them.
el desastre va a ser.
Another one is to identify
Piensen
when
bien
these
las
words
consecuencias.
are being
Moche
used
nunca más va a venir
within the classroom setting, for example,
y él le
which
va
can
a
be useful
joder la
for
vida.
teachers. And with that, they can start encouraging the use of more inclusive words.
Piensen bien en las consecuencias.
Also, it is highly advisable to take a minute and think about the consequences and effects that words can produce on people, especially if recipients are not that well known by speakers. And as a further study, we can say that qualitative research, sorry, can be done using the identified offensive words as maybe a ground base to
Habla
find
con la
more
mano.
strategies to implement the use of more inclusive words. And with that, I will end my presentation and thank you all again for listening.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. You may turn the
Okay.
presentation off now. And now we go to the questions section.
Fer, this is a very interesting topic. And I wanted to know what was the most surprising fact or conclusion that you got to.
Well, I can say that according to the research I done, that I didn't find any difference regarding genders, because as we have seen, supposedly men use more offensive words than women, and then we have seen that women are also using more offensive words, but in the end, they both consider. I mean, having this thesis into account, that they both consider the same words as offensive, and they actually have the same opinions regarding the factors and the other things.
So in the end, we're more similar to each other than what we think,
Yeah.
rather than different. Okay. Miss Migliorisi?
Okay, Fer, congratulations on a very solid and professional presentation, I must say.
Thank you.
Um, I found it very interesting when you mentioned a conclusion regarding where these people heard these words for the very first time. You mentioned school as being one of the most frequent places where they heard these words. So taking that into account, because that's a very important finding, especially when we talk about early intervention and prevention. Um, since you also displayed the impact this has on people on a long-term base. So, what would you suggest if you had an interview with a school board? What would your suggestions be to approach this issue?
Well, the first one, as I said, it was about since since we now know which are these words, so try to be more aware of those words within the classroom, for example, trying to note when these are said, even if they are said in like joking, for example, because in the end we don't know how the other people might be feeling. So because of that, the thing will be to be more aware and try to recognize when those words are used, and try to maybe,
Ya
for example, if
contesté.
we say fat to someone, to one of our classmates, so try to approach that kid
Pobre, seguro que
or
un niño está llorando
student
por él.
and say, no, not like don't say this word, but instead saying other things, not
Vender.
yeah,
Ah,
Definitely. So it would definitely be raising awareness on one hand and giving the students alternatives in communicating in a more effective and respectful manner. So,
exactly, like giving them more inclusive words.
excellent. Because this is very important, as I said, because this is basically bully prevention. If we think
Exactly.
about it in a macro manner, we're talking about prevention of bullying, which is key. So,
Exactly.
congratulations, Fer, and I think you have a lot to contribute with
Thank you.
your research findings.
Thank you.
Miss Weaver?
Yes, I've been pondering this. I was surprised actually when I saw the title of this topic. It was quite different than anything else I've seen presented at the ISL, and there is a little bit of a problem I feel in engaging offensive words in that there may be a slant according to the language, and when we're translating the words that were used in the survey, which are in Spanish, and then finding the equivalent English, which is uh, what you're required to present because your thesis has to be in English, that there may be a loss of meaning or a difference at some point. So that is a bit of a concern in terms of the methodology. But I agree that it is an original topic to research and to provide a serious study. And I'm wondering about this issue of how we see words being offensive if we don't know the person. So it looks like there is a certain amount of tolerance for offensive words if it's coming from someone that we are close to, because we discredit it as being offensive and we take it as a joke. You mentioned,
Yeah.
uh, people thinking it's a joke. So these are interesting matters to explore, and I think it shows a breadth in the research interest at the university that we have um, a very different topic presented with the vigor of, or the rigor, let's say, of methodology and qualitative and quantitative analysis. So that is all that I would add at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Fair, I do have a question, and it goes in the line of Ms. Weaver's concern for translation. I'm sorry if this was mentioned in the study, but I don't think I remember reading it. What was the Spanish equivalent for faggot that you use in your survey?
For faggot in Spanish is maricón.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. How strong it was in Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
O sea, the four-letter word was not used. Did that ever come up? El puto, which puto and puta have very different meanings
In
Yeah.
in
Spanish.
Spanish according to whether it's male or female. And one may be sexual promiscuity and another more a homosexual bias. So I don't know if this is being recorded, Professor
It
It
is.
is, but there
Christian,
was
or
a
not.
disclaimer at the beginner.
Yeah.
But
The
that
beginning, I'm
is,
sorry.
yes, there was a disclaimer at the beginning. This is the topic of the thesis, so we cannot avoid saying these words that are considered as
Yes.
typically offensive
It's
or
for the
not.
purposes of research. Bueno, if there are no further questions or comments, Mr. Christopher?
Muy bien, entonces pedimos ahora a la disertante y también a los invitados si pueden dejarnos un momento y les vamos a avisar cuándo pueden volver a la sala. Muchas gracias.
Okay.
Mr. C, don't forget to tell the people that they have to record again. The
Ok.
filosofía people.
Sí, en este momento se puede continuar la grabación desde este punto. Okay, go ahead.
Fer, we are more than delighted to have a study like this done. We really appreciate the significance and how brave you were in choosing a topic that it's very delicate, and how professional you were as a researcher in facing such a topic. So we're proud to have you as a student and now as our colleague. Felicidades, licenciada. You have your thesis approved with a 5. Aprobado con un 5.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much, professors, for all these years. Thank you.
We're super happy. More than happy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I am too.
Bueno, and now we have to take the picture.
Ujú.
So if
Por
the people
favor,
who
si
are
los
here with
invitados
us
también pueden encender
abrir sus
sus
cámaras.
cámaras. Vamos a tomar una foto.
Para la
And then
Estamos,
Mr.
posteridad.
Christopher can also stop the recording so then we can.
yeah, after that. Or,
After the picture.
or now. Yeah, no. Picture first and then.
I know. Are you taking the picture, Mr. C?
No, you do it.
Okay. I will then. Foto en 3, 2, 1. Ahí fue. Ya está.
Muy
Ese
bien.
se fue. Ah,
Sí.
Muy bien,
too bad.
entonces felicitamos una vez más a nuestra flamante colega licenciada Fernanda Barrios. Mañana le espera la secretaria Nilda para que ella haga oficialmente su primera firma como licenciada en los documentos.
Ok.
Y estamos felices con ella. Entonces, esto ha sido la presentación, la disertación de la graduada Fernanda Barrios, licenciada en lengua inglesa en el Instituto Superior de Lenguas, siendo el día de hoy 9 de junio y terminando a las 19:47 horas. Muchas gracias. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and then we